Is Marco Pierre White's White Heat an absolute masterpiece that inspires kitchen, or is it a relic of an overblown period? Let's dive into the revolutionary world of Marco Pierre White through the medium of his book White Heat, which came out in 1990, and let's try and understand what's going on at the time and whether we can still feel that influence today. As a backdrop, I'm going to prepare one of his recipes, a steak recipe from the book, to try and get into the heart of it. Looking back on White Heat today, it's regarded as a cookbook that transformed the landscape. It took chefs from back kitchens to front of house, truly, where they were finally seen. It's seen as the first cookbook to merge gastronomy with a rock and roll character, and that's exactly what you get with Marco. So I'm having a look at this recipe, which is unhandily titled Piece of Scotch Beef, Confit of shallots and garlic with a red wine and shallot sauce. Scotch beef in itself is a strange description, as in it's Scottish beef. Scotch is not usually the adjective. Scotch usually means to wrap something in breadcrumbs. But he's specific about having a ribeye of beef. And you look at the ingredient list and it looks really simple and straightforward. And you get towards the bottom and then you see the dreaded words, see page 122, 4 times. There are 4 things that need to be created as garnish, and that's where the work is, and that's the bit where I think I'm going to suffer. I own the White Heat 25 edition, that is the 25th anniversary. Alongside the original book, the back end is all what's happened since, with a timeline of Marco's career, with comments from people like Adam Byatt, from Phil Howard, from Pierre Kaufman, from Tom Kerridge, from Sat Baines, and of course Gordon Ramsay. Marco Pierre White, he's the man who started it. He's the man who put the stake in the ground, gave chefs a profile, put London on the map. I was 19 and got my arse kicked, but I loved every minute of it and learnt a lot. He was a powerful man to play a game of chess with. You can get yourself into check, but you can never get checkmate. And of course, Anthony Bourdain says he owes his career to it. He was working as a line cook and he read White Heat, and it transformed the way he looked at being a chef, as he saw someone else in Marco, a kindred spirit, and they would later become great friends. I did a piece on some of their friendship up there. So the influence continues to roll down the decades. Looking at some of the photographies, it's very 1990. Having the coffee table book was the thing back then, and some of it is quite a bit ridiculous. And in contrast to the steak recipe we're looking at, Marco says, "These days I love to cook at home. Cooking for family and friends is one of my great pleasures. Simple roasts and one-pot dishes that can be plonked in the middle of the table." So where does this book sit now as we look at it? Well, I picked up a copy from the library about a year ago, read it and devoured it within the hour, and immediately went and bought my own copy because I knew it was something I had to have around. It is a fascinating work. You can feel the ferocity and the energy in the pages. As a cookbook, just impossible. It's not well written for a cookbook. I don't think it was ever meant to be. It was more a mission statement to say, this is what I've made and this is what I do, and good luck trying to keep up. But you can tell the kernel of great recipes are in there. Just blooming hard. Have a good read through. I even had to make a plan to make sure I was doing everything at the right time for this recipe. It's a fascinating read and it's beautifully laid out. The content is a bit dated, but the energy and passion in the book is unparalleled. Last night I already marinated some shallots in red wine vinegar, thyme and bay. So that part's already done. We're going to simmer that later as our finishing sauce. It's quite crazy. You look at the directions. To make the sauce, make a sauce, cook the beef, and then to serve. And that's it, just those 3 broad headings. But that to serve section hides probably half an hour to an hour of work by my guesstimations, because you're going to make a confit of garlic, a confit of shallot. I can do those both at the same time, that's okay. A fricassee of mushrooms and quenelles of creamed parsley. Creamed parsley really dates this, I think. My initial instinct is this is an overworked recipe designed for a restaurant and not for a home cook, but there's no indication that that's going to be either way. You know, I'm making that assumption. Let's figure it out together. I'm going to start with the confit of garlic and shallots. I can pop them in foil, pop them in the oven, and then just forget about them while I get on with everything else. So this isn't going to be too bad. I'm going to scale this recipe down to just 3 shallots, 3 large cloves of garlic, thyme and bay with a large pinch of salt. And of course it wouldn't be a Marco recipe without butter. Gonna wrap that up like a present. Now he says to leave it on a bed of rock salt, but I don't have enough salt in the house to do that, so I'm just not gonna do it. That's now gonna go in the oven for 20 minutes, after which I'll remove the garlics and let the shallots cook for a further 10 minutes until softened. Now we're going to move on to the creamed watercress. Keep saying watercress, by the way, because the recipe says creamed watercress, but you can make it with parsley instead. But this recipe calls for parsley. A bit confusing. Anyway, parsley and watercress. And that's going to go into a pan of boiling water. I've got my parsley, so I'm just going to boil that 3 to 4 minutes. Once the parsley's ready, I'm going to be squeezing the liquid out of it. And then in classic Marco style, it says, place the drained greens in a food processor, turn on the blender, and gradually add the cream. Now, a blender will do a different job. And looking at the picture, it's a very fine mixture. So I'm going to use a blender rather than a food processor, because I think essentially you are looking for a puree, not just chopped up parsley. So let's try that. And now I'm going to squeeze it out in my best marigolds. We're going to get like a fist-sized amount, which funnily enough looks like about the amount that we'll need for the finished dish. There's your 100 grams of parsley turned into nothing. And now we whiz it up, adding some cream as we go. Yeah, that's going to be hell to clean later on, but we'll deal with that. Not bad. Mostly tastes of cream. So we're going to wrap it in cling film so it doesn't lose its colour. I'm just going to refrigerate that till we need it. I'm going to get the sauce on and then look at the fricassee of mushrooms. And then in classic Marco style, it says, oh, just add shallots to red wine chopped. They should probably be really fine, but I haven't done that. But we'll be okay. We'll survive. Whilst that is reducing, that needs to reduce by half. I'm going to start on the fricassee of mushrooms. Marco demands wild mushrooms like girole. My budget doesn't stretch to that. I really like chestnut mushrooms, so I'm just going to simply chunk these up a bit. I'm not going to make fiddly little things because I want to be able to see them on the plate. So if I just quarter these, and of course we demand the tomato peeled, so I'm just going to pop that tomato, quiver it across, pour over boiling water, and then pretty much remove it after a few seconds, and that should allow the skin to come off. So that's boiled away for a bit, boiled down to about 2/3. I'm going to add some stock. I don't have access to veal stock, but I am using a stock pot, so I think Marco would approve. Garlic and shallots have had 20 minutes. Apparently the garlic should be done at this point. It should be soft, but not mushy. Indeed they are. Shallots go back in. Just showing you the garlic's there. So they're just going to hang out cooling off. So there's our sauce nearly ready. There's a final stage to add butter, but we do that literally the last minute. It tastes really good. It's booze and stock, what's not to like? I'm going to put a lid on that now, just leave that alone. We'll come back to it to finish. So we start our mushrooms, just shallots being softened in butter. Shallots of course have a really tender, gentle flavour, so they don't need the same cooking that your fist-sized onions need. Then add the mushrooms. If you've come to this channel before, you'll know I often have a little portable hob set up here, but this recipe is just far too busy with too much going on. I'm going to need at least 3 hobs going for the finale of the recipe, so that's why I'm working over there. And this is another component that yet again I'm going to take part way and then stop and then finish. There now my cooked mushrooms, just waiting for the end. Finally, our oven roasted shallots. There's our shallots there, just starting to break down. And again, they will be a final garnish. So our sauce is nearly ready, just one final stage. Our garlic, our onions, our tomatoes, our mushrooms, just need a finishing stage. I think all that's left now is for the meat. So I've got a piece of ribeye. I can't guarantee it's Scottish, but it is from Britain, I know that much. Decent bit of fat. I think it's quite tender, so let's get on with it. Season well with salt and pepper both sides. He doesn't specify, but Marco likes white pepper. And we add the steak to the pan. So while my steak rests over there, I can now bring the rest of the garnishes up. I'm going to warm the mushrooms through and add tomatoes, and I'm going to add butter to the sauce, and I'm going to dry fry the parsley. So bear with me. Classic restaurant service, right? So that everything is like bang, bang, bang. I think this process is Monte, where you gradually incorporate butter into a sauce. Don't know what I'm doing here. Perfect, don't change a thing. Moment of truth, of course, always fun. Cut the ribeye into 12, it says, but it's an odd square shape, so that's not going to happen with this one. I think we've gone into medium territory, but you know what? Fan the beef, he says. Dotting our onions around. Pieces of garlic. Our mushroom tomato mix. Our quenelle of parsley, which was fine, and then I ruined it. Yes, with the quenelle you should be using 2 spoons, yada yada yada. I can't be bothered. Not a bad approximation. Where to start? I mean, there's so much here. So I've tried a bit of everything. The beef is great, it's a piece of ribeye, it's lovely. Mushrooms are really tasty. I don't quite know what the tomatoes are doing there, but whatever. The parsley is fine, but it's very heavy flavour, quite dominant actually. And the roasted garlic and onions are lovely. The sauce is great. Marco's really good at his sauces. And in fact, the sauce isn't that much work. So I would keep that sauce and I would just roast some shallots and mushrooms together in foil in the oven, salt and butter, leave them to do their thing, cook your steak, add the onions and mushrooms, the shallots and mushrooms, pour over your sauce and garnish with parsley, fresh parsley, just to freshen things up, to cleanse the palate, as Marco says. And I think you'd have a cracking dish there. It is a cracking dish, but there's lots of bits and pieces, and certainly not one to be attempted by a solo chef. It's so much concentration at the end, whereas if you've got the guy who's responsible for sauces doing his bit, the garnish guy doing his bit, and then the grill chef cooking his meat, then it all comes together quite easily. But as a solo effort, a lot more work than you actually get out of it on the plate. But a really fascinating insight into 1990s cutting edge food culture at one of the best restaurants in the world at the time. Absolutely fascinating. Are there more Marco recipes you'd like to see me attempt? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.